God bless everyone. How are you doing? Welcome to another episode of Ask the Coach. I pray you've had a great week and I'm so excited to be with you. Before we get started, can I ask you to share, subscribe and like. If you're on a social media platform, share it to all those in your contact feed. I promise you they're going to be blessed by the episode. And a shout out to all our younger TV viewers. It is great to always be with you. And this week we have a good question, I promise you. So here we go. It says this: please help. I have an issue with people always overstepping their boundaries in many areas of my life. So I want to say thank you for that question. I think it's a great question. And I think actually we can all identify where we've had people overstepping the boundaries in our own lives. And maybe on the flip side also, we should acknowledge that we've overstepped the boundaries in other people's lives. We've pushed that just a little bit too far. So I want us to be aware of both of them. But as I was thinking about this question about boundaries and how to implement boundaries in our lives, I remembered I watched this movie. I've watched it a couple of times. It's a really good comedy sort of romance movie. It's called The Devil Wears Prada. If you haven't watched it, you must check it out. But just a summary of where I'm going with this. You have a character of Andy, who is an aspiring journalist. She's fresh out of university, right? But despite her ridicule for the shallowness of the fashion industry, she actually lands this dream job as a junior personal assistant to Miranda. And Miranda is the editor-in-chief of Runway magazine. Now, Andy's job is what millions of girls would kill for, literally. And so Andy plans to put up with her boss, Miranda, who has excessive demands. I mean, overstepping boundaries? Yes, that's Miranda. She treats Andy with humility, contempt. I mean, she's really a pretty horrible boss. But Andy's plan is this: I'm going to cope with the humiliation. I'm going to cope with the overstepping of boundaries for 1 year, 12 months max. And after that, I'm going to get my dream job. I'm going to be a writer. So Andy has a plan. Now, when she starts out in this job, she's pretty terrible at it, to be honest. She's poor at understanding the culture she's working in. Her dress sense is off the chain and she's struggling. So Andy realizes that I won't last 12 months if I don't get my act together. So quickly, she learns about the culture she's working in. She changes her style of dressing. She becomes engaged in the position. She begins to excel. And a part of all of this is that Andy has to accommodate all of Miranda's whims and fancies. I mean, whatever Miranda wants, Miranda gets. 2 a.m. Miranda, no problem. A rare book for your twins, no problem, Miranda. In her boss's world, there is no night and day. They're all the same. There is no off duty. You're always working. Now, someone who's always working constantly at their boss's beck and call automatically, obviously, will impact their life. They'll impact their life in their home. And so you have her boyfriend, Ned, now complaining to Andy that what's happened to you? You're never present emotionally. You're never present physically. You're always at Miranda's beck and call. She calls and you jump and you say, hi, Miranda, what do you need? And he's like, what's going on? Why are you like this? Now, the thing that fascinates me about Andy's character is that Andy knows that she's been manipulated. She knows she's been taken advantage of. She knows that Miranda is overstepping the boundaries day after day. And so I think about your question, and actually, the first thing is I know that you know that this is not healthy. You know that someone or a group is overstepping the boundaries that you want to have in place, and that is not satisfactory to you. You want to do something about it. So the question must be, right? Why do people keep overstepping the boundaries with Miranda and yourself? Why do people keep taking advantage of us? And number one, could it be because actually we're trying to be someone else rather than ourselves? Andy was trying to be someone else for Miranda. Andy's aim was, I wanted to hear well done. I want to hear Miranda tell me that was a great job. Wow, Andy, you're brilliant at the job. And so she keeps striving for Miranda's acceptance and approval. And maybe that's a bit of the challenge you're facing, that you're striving for approval from a group or a people or a person. You're striving for acceptance, and by overextending yourself, by allowing the boundaries you want to have in place to be destroyed or dismantled, actually you think that's a way of someone recognizing your value, your worth to them. Now, if you want to know whether Miranda ever says to, Andy, well done, you're brilliant, you got to watch the movie. But that's a real good important point, that if that's the reason why the boundaries are being broken down, you've got to acknowledge and recognize that. Secondly, could it be that actually that person is overstepping the boundaries in your life? Like Andy, you want to please someone. You want them to be happy with you. Andy wanted Miranda to be happy with her. There was something that she wanted to feel emotionally. And maybe for you, you want to please individual or person. You want them to be happy. And listen, we all want people to be happy, but to the extent where you're overstretching yourself, to the extent where you are suffering, to the extent where those around you are suffering, that's an alarm bell. That's like boundaries. There's no more boundary walls. Alarm, alarm, alarm. Do something about it quick. And so you need to recognize what is going on emotionally for you. You know, if we're lacking that self-confidence, that self-esteem, absolutely people are able to then override us really easily because the boundaries we have in place are not firm and they're easily stepped over. When someone oversteps their boundaries, instead of challenging them, do you remain silent? That's really important. You know you've got some boundaries in place. And when that's breached, what do you do about it? Do you do nothing at all? You know, the reality is that we have to speak up about these things. We've got to say what is possible. And so this is a scenario I give. It happens all the time when we work, isn't it? We're in a meeting, we're collaborating with other colleagues and someone comes with a great concept. It's fantastic. Everyone's excited and someone says, great, let's do it on the 25th. Everyone quickly checks their diary, or some people don't go, yeah, the 25th works. Excellent. It's all set. What do you do in that moment when you know you're not available on the 25th? Do you remain silent and go away and adjust your diary and tell everyone, I'm really, really sorry. It's work. You understand. You've got to understand. It's my job. Or do you, in that moment, put your finger up and say, actually, guys, can I say something? The concept is great. I think it's going to work. But the 25th, I'm not available. I can do any other day, but not the 25th. That's quite powerful to be able to actually challenge what's been said and say what you can and cannot do. Here's another good tip to recognize if the boundary walls are really in place or not. Andy apologized to Miranda profusely for everything. Are you an over-apologetic person? Do you apologize all the time for stuff you shouldn't be apologizing for? Apologize for the fact that the coffee is too lukewarm. Apologizing that the pen is in the wrong position, that you're standing in the wrong place in the room, that you're blocking the sunlight. Apologizing maybe for breathing. You know, Andy was proficient at apologizing to Miranda for always doing stuff. And so sometimes being over-apologetic is a great sign that actually there is something inherently wrong or going wrong on the inside of me. And being apologetic for stuff that is out of your control is a bit crazy. And so remember that. Check your apology level. You know, check if you're overcompensating for those individuals or for that person. Maybe that person knows actually that you're too afraid to rock the boat. Maybe they know you're a people pleaser. Maybe they know that you'll never say no. I know those are a bit harsh, but I wanted to reflect on that. I too have to reflect on it all the time. You know, when you don't want to rock the boat, it means you're going to go with the majority all the time. You're going to go with the strongest contender, the strongest voice, the bully, if that's sometimes. You're always going to go with them. And if you're known for someone that just does and never says, it's easy then to break down your boundaries and to overstep them. A colleague will dump work on your table and tell you they've run out of time. Can you take on the project? You will work twice as hard as your colleagues and get the same pay. You know, if you have no boundaries, you'll work through your lunch break. You won't take holiday. What holiday? That's for wimps. You will overextend yourself. You know, the reality is that I'm not asking you to send a tsunami. Rocking the boat could be a gentle breeze. It could be, I'm actually not available, or I can't take this on, or my workload's already full. That's not possible at this time, but thank you for asking me. It's those sort of things you're wanting to do. You see, people are only able to overstep their boundaries when we avoid speaking our mind. And I think that's the sense of what I'm getting here. You know there's a problem. You know they're overstepping the boundaries. But have you told them? Have you said anything? Have you raised their awareness to what they're doing? You can't just remain silent and send telepathic messages to people. You've got to actually open your mouth at some stage and say, this is not possible, or this is not acceptable, or you've gone too far. It's important. You know, as a woman, I'll be honest, I have read, like you haven't seen on the news, the amount of women that have had to come forward and say, I'm breaking the silence. I'm not going to put up with this anymore. This is what happened to me. I was told I had to do this in order to progress my career. Silence is something that we must put in its place. You mustn't remain silent in a situation where you're being disadvantaged, where people are taking advantage of you. You've got to speak up. Women, we have got to speak up. So when you say, it's fine, don't worry about it, I can make that happen. Oh yeah, I'll take care of that. You're allowing people to overstep the boundaries with you, with your time, disrespecting what you're able to do and what you're not able to do. And I want you to be conscious of that. You know, Colossians 4:6 says this, let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. You see the text, right? It says, let your speech always be gracious. That means you have to say something. If your boundaries are being breached, if the walls are down, if there is no boundaries in place, say something. Speak. Don't remain silent. People won't know. People will say you didn't say anything. So the first expectation is speak, say something, and do it with grace. You don't have to smash the room up. We're just saying, listen, this is what's possible and this is not what's possible. You know, a child of God, we have the grace of God. The way we conduct ourselves is with great dignity. We can say no and the person feels good. And so the idea is that it's not a confrontation you're looking for. You're establishing what you're able to do. Season with salt. So that's about wisdom, isn't it? Being able to preserve relationships. We're saying no, but we're not going to give in emotionally. We're not going to be blackmailed into doing things we don't want to do or able to do. And therefore, give an answer. You know, you can't remain silent when it comes to your boundaries. You can't remain silent with what people want of you. You can't leave them to decide whether you're going to do it or not. You own the responsibility to respond to requests and to respond to even bullying and say no. Put boundaries in place and stick to them. So here comes a really big question. Could you be attracted to controlling people? You know, if this is not just one-off, if this is a regular event where lots of people are doing it to you, actually check those around you. Are there lots of controlling people that only want you to do what they say when they say it? You know, a healthy relationship, whether it's professional, whether it's romantic or family, any relationship, church relationship, all need boundaries. It's really important to know that. Every relationship needs boundaries. Why? Because boundaries are there to let good stuff in and to keep bad stuff out. If you have no boundaries, both the good, the bad, and the indifferent is what you will experience. The boundary walls are there to protect you and to protect others around you. You see, boundaries set the limits in place of what is acceptable behavior towards you and what is acceptable behavior that you are able towards other people. It's fair, it's 50-50. It's what you will tolerate and what others will tolerate, and what you will disallow and what others disallow. You know, it's always important to communicate what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable and stick to those boundaries. If you can't say no to people, if it's hard for people to accept your no, and if you say no to people you have a friend relationship with, a business relationship, a colleague relationship, a romantic relationship with, if when you say no, their mood sours, they stop talking to you, they bar you, they block you, they do all kinds of stuff, that is an indication that that is unhealthy. If you're trying to put boundaries in place and people are refusing to accept the boundaries, pay attention. That relationship is unhealthy, and definitely for it to survive, you're going to need to introduce some healthy boundaries. So how do you deal with this? How do you put boundaries in place? How do you remain healthy for yourself, for your loved ones, and healthy for all those around you? So I'm going to give you a couple of questions to answer yourself. Because as you ask yourself these questions and you provide the answer, it's really going to help you to set boundaries for all the relationships you have. Not just some, but all of them need boundaries. So here it is. First question. Do you have difficulty saying no? Number 2. Are there some people you are always giving in to? Number 3. Are there some people you always say yes to? Number 4. What happens when you agree with your friends and your family around you? Next one. What happens when you don't agree with your family and your friends? What takes place? And here's a really good one. Who are the hardest people in your life to put boundaries in place with? Are there people in your life who you simply can't say no to? And if you do say no to them, it causes a problem in the relationship. How does those important to you respond to your no's? That's the final question. You see, how people respond to boundaries is a great indication whether that relationship was ever healthy or not. We all like people to say yes. That's the honest truth. I certainly do. But I have to value relationships and value those close to me that sometimes I'm going to hear, no, it's not possible. I'd love to, but I don't have the capacity. Actually, this is out of my remit. I can't help you. And when we get those knockbacks, we have to assess, how do I respond to that? Because maybe you're somebody that actually consistently, like Miranda, oversteps boundaries with other people. Maybe when people tell you no, or they can't do it, or tell you they're struggling, it's like, oh, but you'll find a way, it'll be okay. Rather than listening to what they're saying, acknowledging it, and helping them to find a way through. Hey, to all the Miranda people, listen to me for a couple of minutes. You're overstepping the boundaries. You've got to learn to accept people's yeses as well as people's no's. Don't bully people. Don't force them to do things they don't want to do. We all have to check our emotions. We all have to respond to people. When they say no, don't disrespect them. Don't abandon that friendship. Don't block them. It's a really bad behavior, and we need to behave properly and correctly. We are children of the light. We are loving one another, not because of what we do for one another, but because we value relationship. Now, come on. Every believer knows that if God was to respond to us like Miranda, only when you do something I want you to do, then you get a reward. And anything else, when you don't do it, I'm going to leave you alone, I'm going to abandon you, is a bad God. I thank God for Jesus. Our God is a good God. You know, the Bible is clear. Despite our behavior, He loves us. And that's what we need to express to one another. I value you, not because of what you can do for me, but because you always add value to my life. You always cause me to self-examine my worth, my value, my identity. And I appreciate your yeses as I appreciate your no's. Listen, let me pray for you right now. I decree over you as you're struggling with boundaries. I pray that you'll begin to establish healthy boundaries in every area of your life. I pray that healthy boundaries will produce a healthy mind, a healthy body, and that all those around you will benefit from the healthiness of who you are. I decree every stress and carnage to be removed from your life, and I speak the abundance of peace to overflow you now. In Jesus' name, amen. Listen, thank you all for joining me for another episode of Ask the Coach. Before you go, I want to remind you, or let you know rather, of my upcoming course. Under my business from 0 to 100% me, I'm going to be running my Master Key Series course. It starts the 11th of May. It's online. So you can join me on these sessions online in any country. I'm going to take you on a 7-week journey of coaching you to deal with boundaries like this one, to deal with failure, to deal with hearing the voice of God, to deal with your vision and how to pursue that. If you want to be with me for 7 weeks in a closed group where I'm teaching you how to be victorious in every area of your life, how to be a doer and not a procrastinator, you've got to register. Listen, ladies, this is our year. This is a year to advance and to be all that God has created us to be. So I want to hear from you. Visit my website, SimoneOlagokeMinistries.com, and register for my upcoming course, the Master Key Series. Until next week, you keep on winning. You know that you're on God's side. God is definitely on your side. Take care and God bless.